Have you ever thought your containers were completely safe, only to find out an attacker could break out and access your host system? Sounds scary, right? Well, that's exactly what container escape attacks are all about. Welcome to Bluehat Cybersec Academy. Today, we're going to explore how attackers escape Docker, Kubernetes, and other container environments, and, most importantly, how you can stop them. So let's start by understanding what container escape attacks really are. Containers, powered by technologies like Docker and orchestrated through Kubernetes, allow developers to package applications and dependencies together. This makes deployments portable, scalable, and super efficient. But here's the catch. This convenience comes with a unique security risk: container escape attacks. These happen when a malicious actor manages to break out of a container's isolation and gain access to the host system, or even worse, to other containers. Suddenly, what you thought was a safe sandbox can turn into a critical security breach. At their core, containers are isolated environments, but they still share the host's operating system kernel. And this shared kernel can be a weak spot. Any vulnerabilities in the kernel or container runtime can allow attackers to escape their container and execute commands on the host system. These attacks are particularly dangerous because they bypass the isolation that containers are supposed to provide. Attackers can pivot to other containers, and sensitive data, credentials, and workloads can all be exposed. In simple terms, a container escape can turn a sandboxed app into a full system compromise. So, how do these attacks happen? Let's break it down. First, there are kernel vulnerabilities. Since containers share the host OS kernel, any unpatched vulnerability can be exploited. A classic example is Dirty Cow, CVE 2016-5195, which allowed privilege escalation on Linux systems. Second, misconfigured container runtimes can be a gateway for attackers. If Docker, containered, or runts are misconfigured, attackers can gain elevated privileges. For example, running containers as root inside the container or mounting sensitive directories can open doors. Third, insecure host configurations can provide attackers with an escape path. Improper permissions on host volumes, devices, or network interfaces can allow attackers to manipulate system resources and leave the container environment. And fourth, even in Kubernetes, attackers can exploit orchestration misconfigurations. Over-permissioned service accounts, exposed API servers, or privileged pods running with host access can all become vectors for escape attacks. To make this more real, let's look at some examples. In 2019, a vulnerability in runc allowed attackers to execute arbitrary code on the host from inside a container. Docker and Kubernetes environments relying on runc were impacted. Another example is Dirty Cow, which exploited the Linux kernel's copy-on-write mechanism to gain root privileges and escape container isolation. And in Kubernetes, misconfigured privileged pods or exposed etcd databases have been exploited to gain cluster-wide access. These examples clearly show that even isolated containers can be dangerous if the host, runtime, or orchestration isn't properly secured. If a container escape succeeds, the consequences can be severe. They can compromise the host, move laterally to other containers or services, steal sensitive data from volumes or environment variables, and disrupt workloads by stopping, deleting, or modifying them. Container escapes aren't just theoretical, they're high-impact, real-world threats. Now that we understand the risks, let's talk about best practices to prevent container escapes. First, avoid running containers as root. Always run containers with the least privilege possible. Use non-root users, and avoid giving unnecessary capabilities inside containers. Second, keep the host and kernel updated. Regularly patch the Linux kernel, container runtime, and orchestration tools to fix known vulnerabilities before attackers can exploit them. Third, limit privileged containers. Only use privileged containers if absolutely necessary and restrict them using Kubernetes pod security policies or Open Policy Agent, OPA. Fourth, secure Docker and Kubernetes configurations. Don't mount /var/run/docker.sock unless it's truly needed. Restrict sensitive volume mounts, limit exposed ports, and use R/C to minimize permissions. Fifth, enable runtime security tools. Monitoring tools can detect suspicious behaviors like unexpected system calls or privilege escalation attempts in real time. Sixth, scan images for vulnerabilities. Tools like Claire, Trivy, or Anchor can scan container images before deployment and reduce your attack surface. And finally, network segmentation and isolation. Limit container-to-container communication to reduce the blast radius if one container is compromised. In conclusion, container escape attacks are a serious threat in modern cloud-native environments. While containers provide isolation, attackers can exploit vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, or overprivileged containers to break out and compromise the host, or even the entire cluster. By following best practices like least privilege, regular patching, secure configuration, runtime monitoring, and image scanning, you can dramatically reduce the risk of container escape attacks. Remember, containers are powerful, but security must never be assumed. It must always be enforced. Now here's a challenge for you. Can you name 3 ways attackers can escape a container? And what's the first best practice you would implement to secure a Docker or Kubernetes container? Drop your answers in the comments. We'd love to see what strategies you come up with. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bluehat Cybersec Academy for more cloud security lessons. Be sure to check out our cloud security playlist to stay ahead in securing your containers, cloud apps, and infrastructure. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.